out there, and that we need to be able to articulate that message for people and bring new people to our side and grow the party. And I think that can happen. I'm not a politician. I'm a physician. I've been in private practice for 15 years. I've raised my children and still trying to the best I can. But I'm not someone who's been part of the system. If you elect people who are part of the system, they want to remain part of the system. If it's all they've ever done, they will try and do whatever it takes to remain in power and to remain in office. I'd just soon go up for 1 or 2 terms. That's all I ask, just 1 or 2 terms in the Senate, and I'll come home. But I want to shake things up. I'm not going to go up there and just say, you know, here's your federal projects. I can bring you a bunch of stuff home. I'm going to say the budget is way out of whack. We're out of money, and that the deficit is ultimately looming over us. And our country, I see our country kind of like Rome in about 200 AD, or maybe even 150 AD. We've been a great nation and a great country and the greatest economic system. And I mean, we gave more money privately in Katrina than the government even gave. We gave more money to the tsunami victims than any country did privately. We have this enormous engine. We won the Cold War. Why did we win the Cold War? Not through pitched battles, but because the engine of capitalism defeated the engine of socialism. And we haven't said that enough. We kind of acknowledge we won the Cold War, but nobody says why. Soviet Union didn't work because they fixed the prices. We have to say that fixing prices is wrong. We have to argue in medicine that fixing prices is wrong. Right now, all the medical prices, I'm a doctor, but we should get the government out of fixing the prices. We should ask the question, is medicine and healthcare messed up in our country because of too much government or too little government? 55% of what I do is already the government. 50% is Medicare and 5% is Medicaid. So I'm already more doing government work where all the prices are fixed. There is no competition. Prices don't go up and down. So I think we can articulate a different message. But if you get someone who's a career politician who is in the center and is going to, you know, someone who's an ex-Democrat or former Democrat, and they come forward, I think what you'll get is more of the same, because you have to get someone who truly believes in less government to try to pitch and bring that seesaw back to some kind of balance. If you elect someone in the center, I don't think you'll get that. Yes?
You touched on a point there of medical costs. My research indicates that 15% plus of medical costs would be cured if there was tort reform, malpractice. I've had several doctor friends who have been unable to retire because they have to continue their horrendous malpractice insurance for 10 years after they retire.
Yeah, significant part of the problem is no capitalism in medicine, but another part is the tort reform. Torts, we have OBs in my town that pay over $100,000 just for their insurance. There are law firms, and no insult to our young attorneys here, but there are law firms that specialize in suing dead doctors. Because it's hard to sue a live doctor, because if he's sitting there at the table, people kind of like their local doctor. They tend to have some sympathy for him, and if he did a good job, tried to do everything right, and the patient still died, which we all die sometimes, it happens, they tend to side with the doctor. But you can sue a dead doctor better. So there's a law firm that just specializes, and that's what they're famous for, suing dead doctors. They sue the estate. There's no doctor sitting there, and they're more likely to win their malpractice suits. So, yeah, tort reform is a big problem. I don't think it's as much a federal problem as it is state. Most people believe that the U.S. Congress can regulate the federal courts, but really cannot regulate the state courts. And some people think they can, but my personal opinion is that you can't pass tort reform from the federal level. You have to pass it in Frankfurt.
What are your views on immigration reform, and if you were to propose an effective policy, what components would that?
I think we have to have rules at the border, and you shouldn't just come into our country willy-nilly. I think if anything is really a problem with our national defense, the defense of our country, is having completely open borders where we don't know who comes across the border. I would propose, I don't like the idea of a 10-foot wall for 3,000 miles. It brings back to me ideas of the Berlin Wall, and I just don't like the symbolism of it. Might there be in some cities needs for walls like that? Yes. But I personally think that you could probably patrol the entire southern border with an electronic fence a foot under the ground and 5 helicopter stations. You know, you could really, it's a wide open desert, and there's very few places you can even get to. They know where everybody's coming across, but do you know when you come across now, if you come across illegally, you're given a traffic summons, and you're told to come back in a month for your court case, and by that time they're in another state. It's not that I'm against immigrants coming to our country. I mean, my great-grandparents were from Germany. I mean, all of us within 100 years or so ago, a lot of us anyway, were immigrants. So I'm not against immigration, but we have to have rules on it. And I think particularly for national defense reasons, you just don't let anybody come flowing across your border. You know, my dad used to say one thing is that the hypocrisy is we were really concerned about the Syrians letting foreign fighters across their border, but we were doing nothing about our own border. So here we are across the world telling somebody else to control their borders, which is hard, but then we're not doing anything to control our own borders, and that's a real danger to where terrorists can come across our borders if we don't have any controls at all. Anybody else?
Just how big do you think this cap and trade, how much of a cumulative effect would it have if it goes through the Senate? How devastating?
I think enormous, and maybe hard to even predict how big it could be because of all the numbers are thrown out, like 80% reduction in emissions, like by 2020 or something. I tell people that jokingly that, well, maybe I'm for this because you know what? If they'll pay me not to pollute, what if I decide not to take my private jet to Paris next week? How much will they pay me? The whole idea of paying someone to trade for pollution, I was telling someone earlier, there's a great essay from the time of the Depression, and some of these are Depression-era notions. In the Depression, we started these farm programs where we would pay people not to grow things. So this guy, I thought it was kind of funny, he wrote a fake letter to his congressman. He says, well, I normally only grow 10 acres of corn, but next year I'm not going to grow 20 acres of corn if you'll pay me not to grow 20. I normally only have about 10 hogs, but next year I won't have 20 hogs if you'll pay me for that. And it's this sort of ridiculous notion, paying people not to do something. Another good example of that is I like to tell people that you can be paid in our country by the federal government for clear-cutting your trees and planting natural prairie grass. They'll pay you to do that, but they'll also pay you to mow your prairie grass down and plant trees. You know, that's the way government works. And government does nothing well, not because they're necessarily inherently stupid, although there may be a problem there too, but because they don't have the profit incentive. What makes the guy who distributes contact lenses is not brilliant either, but he has to compete on a day-to-day basis. That's why contact lenses work, but healthcare doesn't work. There is no price fluctuation in any doctor's fees in the country. Even the private fees are somewhat